I go ahead and start recording. Okay, guys, welcome to another Thursday Learn at Lunch, Training Grant Office Hours. Today I'm going to be talking about, can you see my screen? I hope you can. Yeah, you can. I'm seeing a nod. Okay. About data tables and where to get started. Generally this can be confusing, especially it's because it's so different than and putting together a normal research grant for submission. Training grants are just like a totally different animal. Someone told me recently, like, oh yeah, it's like a grant from another planet. And I go, it's not another planet, it's hell. Basically, it's not another planet, it's a planet called hell. Anyway, so let me go ahead and just do a recap from last week. Last week we talked about trainee tracking. So if you missed it and you want to review or look up on the website about things that you need to be tracking for your program, we talked about the applicants, tracking your participating faculty, current and past trainees, and then any program activities. So this information is really important to be compiling all the time. So for your RPPRs and your renewals that are every 5 years. So today we're just going through the data tables. I'm going to kind of talk about each one just a little bit, and then how to get yourself organized. So for the next couple of weeks, actually next week I'll do data table 1 and 2, and there's 8 data tables, and so I'll go through each one more specifically. Today I'm just doing more of a high level organizational thing, and then when I go through them, like say next week we'll go through data table 1 and 2, I'll show you like how to gather the data or how to best gather the data or verify data, stuff like that. So today we're not going to get into the weeds so much on how to collect all the data, because that is a big part of the process. But in my opinion, just being organized is just like super important. So I don't want you all to just to be a bunch of bean counters. I want you to really understand what the data tables are and how important they are for the grant that you're going to be putting together. It's just, to me, it's important to understand that side of it. So that will help, like when the questions come up, you're going to be able to answer them and go, okay, this is the objective, this is the rationale, why they want this information. And so I think that will help you fill out the tables. Anyway, so data tables obviously they're not for research grants, but they are required for these NERSA grants, the National Research Service Award grants. They're not, I know fellowships are also NERSA grants, but these are not for fellowships, these are for institutional grants. So your T32s, your T34s, your T35s, sometimes R25s, sometimes K12s. It kind of just depends on the mechanism. But basically what they do is they present a detailed and consolidated documentation of your training program. So let's think about when you're doing a research grant and you're trying to write a grant on how to cure cancer. You need to make a case for that, right? You have to have a hypothesis that this method or this immunotherapy is going to cure cancer. And so the same thing here, you need all that documentation to prove, yes, we need funding for this training program. So, so it's clear, this is, you're making a case for why you want to fund this training program. Basically all the data that you're going to be collecting, and there is a lot of data, it will summarize and it'll be summarized in the body of the grant. So the 25-page program plan that your PI writes, it needs to be summarized in there. And so basically you just, again, like you said, you need to make a case, like as in like if a research grant, you need to prove, I can cure cancer, and so you need to write that in the program plan. Here, same thing. You're going to be needing that to write in the program plan. Here's the data. Here is the data tables, and they are going to reflect. This is why we need the program. So basically, so this is an overview, like I said, of the table. So there's 8 tables. The first table talks about it lists all the departments and programs that would be listed that will be associated with your training grant. Sometimes this could be, the Department of Chemistry, the Department of Biology, and the Department of Physics. Or it could be like 10 departments on campus, because it's depending on where you are getting your applicants from for your trainees. So this could include many departments, and not just departments, but programs too. So usually graduate programs, but as we know, NERSA grants can be for pre-docs and postdocs. So it kind of depends on which kind of program. So faculty members. So on average, you have about 35 faculty per training grant. So if you're putting a training grant, there's about 35. I just did a grant and we had 153 faculty, which is abnormally large. I think 50 to 60 is probably, common these days. Sometimes it's up to 80. But so if you have 80 faculty members, those are 80 people you're going to have to reach out to and get information for all, and they're going to be feeding information into each table. So it's quite a bit of information that you have to ask for, and that you have to rely on other people to give it to you. Data table 3 will list all the support, all the other training grants that we have on the campus. So right now we have about, I think it's like 50 other T32s or T mechanisms, but we have other K-12 and R25s and KL2s. And so we have about almost 70 training grants on the campus. So this table will list any overlap between your faculty members that are on your grant and that are listed on other training grants on the campus, because the NIH wants to know what's the depth of how much training do you have on your campus? What are the other options for these faculty members to be involved with? And then research support. A lot of you are probably really familiar with this. This is basically your other support. It's just in direct costs and not in annual direct costs, not in total direct costs. So it's slightly different, but it's just research support. So if a PI has a T32 would not be listed in this table, because that is for teaching purposes, that's for training purposes. And so you wouldn't list that here. So again, it's like another support document, but tweaked just a little bit. So table 5 are publications of your trainees, basically, if this is a new grant or a renewal grant. If they were on the grant, then you'll be listing the publications. And then table 6, and notice it says A and B. So A is for pre-docs, and then B is for postdocs. And so it depends on what kind of application you're doing. If you're doing a mixed program, you're going to do tables 5A and 5B. Or if you're just doing a pre-doc program, it's just going to be, table 5A and 6A. So that's kind of what that means. And I talk about that in another slide. But so applicants' entrance and characteristics for the last 5 years. So basically that will show all the people that have applied to your program and the history of what kind of caliber of trainees that you're getting. And of course my phone rings right. And so so basically you have to, it goes back and wants to know, like for a pre-doc, wants to know your GRE scores or your GPA, sorry, not GRE, GPA scores. If it's a postdoc, they want to know like how many publications did the applicant have upon, applying for the program. They want to know the caliber of the trainees. Table 7, this is only for renewals. And this is basically just looks at all the appointments that you had for the last, renewal period and last project period, and how you filled those slots. And that seems like it's pretty straightforward, and it is. It's probably the easiest table. And then table 8 is basically the fruit of your program, is if you need to be reporting the outcomes of your trainees. And so like, okay, once they left UCSD, where do they go? Do they go to do a residency, or do they go to do a postdoc? Or do they, you know, where do they work now? And then do they have subsequent grants? So they want to see, the reviewers want to see, of all your trainees, how many are going into research? Because remember, that is the objective of a NERSA grant, is they want to create a stronger research, biomedical research. I can't get the word out, but they want to create more scientists in biomedical research, the workforce. So that is, you know, a big table, right? But it's also hard, as we know, to track, which we talked about last week, tracking those trainees, because you have to track up to 15 years. So it can be confusing, and then a lot of work again. So remember, A versus B tables. So if you see something that says an A, 6A or 5A, that would be for pre-doc trainees. B tables are mostly for postdocs. So occasionally, depends if you're tuning in like a T34 or something, you see a table C or table D, and those are for undergraduates. So one thing that's super important to remember is the instructions for the data tables are different between a new and renewal application. I can't even tell you how important this is. And your PI can say, well, no, this is how we did it last time. And you're like, but wait a second, this, you know, we are now putting in a new grant or a renewal. And so the instructions will change. And I'll give you an example. If you are putting in a renewal application, you're looking at the last 15 years of data for table 8, those program outcomes. If you're putting in a new application, you can only go back 5 years that have graduated. So see the difference? I mean, can you imagine if you interpreted the instructions differently or read them differently, you could have been collecting 10 years more data than you actually needed. So it's one of those things. It's a little bit tricky, but this is why I always tell people, just always have, you know, a copy of the instructions handy, because I forget. And so I have that bookmarked, and I'm always looking at the instructions, because sometimes people will question me and I'll be like, let me check. Because then you question yourself, right? So say if you're doing just a pre-doc application, you're doing a new pre-doc training, these are the tables that you would do. See that I would say 6A. And then like, so postdocs, if you're doing a new postdoc application, you're doing all the 5B, 6B, and then the 8C. But say if you're doing a renewal application, you're going to be doing table 7, which is not, you don't have to do table 7 with the new applications. And then of course, if you're doing like a mixed program, you're going to be doing 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B. So in essence, it's 8 tables, but it gets like, there's A, B, C, there's part 1, 2, 3. So it's a little bit, you know, it gets very involved. So let me just give you the background. I think this is important. At least it helped me understand data tables and like why we are doing what we are doing. Why is the PI pushing back on this? Why are they trying to get, you know, this type of data? So I find it really, you know, to understand this high level look of the tables. So NIH, when you submit the grant, they're looking at the qualifications and the accomplishments of the institution, which is generally the departments and the programs. And they want to see what kind of faculty are going to be on the grant. Does the faculty have a lot of research dollars? Do they have a lot of mentoring experience? And then they want to look at your trainees. Where are your trainees now? Once they've graduated from your institution and your department in this wonderful program, where have they gone on to? So they want to establish that historical data. And then, so, the environment is described in tables 1 and 2, because table 1, if you recall, is all about your departments and your programs, and it's going to give statistical data, like how many faculty are in each department, and then how many postdocs are in each department. And then table 6, which kind of correlates with it, is the applicant data. It kind of drills down more into the numbers of the types of applicants and the types of entrants that came into your program. And then it's also going to look at the distribution of the faculty by their research interests. So depending on what kind of grant you have, you may be overlapping with many different disciplines, and they want to see, do you have a lot of women and men? Is it equally, for professors, full professorships, full ranks? Do they have a lot of assistant professors or associate professors? Do you have a lot of diversity in your faculty? And of course, they want to know if they have a lot of research dollars, right? So they can support these trainees. So that's another one thing that they look at. And then the existing support for training and availability of funds. This is just about the research support that I was just talking about. So basically, if your trainee was not on the training program or the T32, is there other funds to help support them? So the reviewers, like I said, they look at the recruitment, they look at your departments, they're looking at the institution as a whole. They look at the degree completion for your table 8. How many of your, say if you're pre-docs, how many of them dropped out of the program, right? How many of them didn't finish the program? What's your program statistics? They want to know, the publications are usually like the fruit. It's a good indicator of how your trainee is doing. So how many publications do they have? And of course, they look at the career progress. Are they progressing in a normal, not normal, I don't know if that's the right word, but in a good, positive manner, right? And so, sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes they get stuck and they're not being effective, I guess, or effective may not be the right word. Anyway, and then they also want to know what they're involved with in research after they leave the program. That is such a huge thing for them. They want to know, is there going to be more research scientists out there? That is their big thing. So where do you begin? You just realize, okay, my PI is going to be submitting a training grant. So normally what I do, and I explain the process to you, but and I'm going to skip to it in another slide, but what I do is a kickoff meeting, and I kind of, if someone comes to me and says, I want to submit a training grant, I'll meet with them usually initially, especially if they've never done it before, obviously, and then explain, okay, this is a process. And some PIs are going to say, well, I don't know what data tables are, but I'm sure they're easy to collect. And they're not. It's much more, if they've never done it before, they're in for a rude awakening. Because I had one PI they thought we have 6 weeks, we can easily do this. I'm like, no, this is a brand new program. It's going to take a lot longer than that. And then once we went through the exercise, they're like, oh yeah, there's no way you can do it in that short amount of time for a new program. Not saying that it's not possible, but it's not likely. So the overall process is like I'm trying to teach you today is understanding this whole process, is understanding the data table. What is the rationale? What are they really looking for in that table? Because that will help you when questions arise, you're going to be able to answer your own question. I guess planning an organization, I can't tell you how important that is. You can't just jump in and decide, I'm going to put data tables together today. It takes quite a bit of planning. Hunting and gathering, there's a lot of hunting and gathering. There's a lot of systems out there. There's a lot of resources on where to find this data, like publications. You might go out to PubMed. You could email a PI for publications or a trainee, or you could, look on their personal website. There's a lot of different tools, right? There's a lot of different places you could be finding that data. So going out and just being that hunter and gatherer is just a lot. This takes a long time. All these pieces of the pie take a while. Then verifying your data. Some people just don't do that, and they take the word of the PI or whoever gave you the information that that's correct data, and sometimes it's not. And I'll give you an example, like research support. Some people will say, okay, I have this R01 and it's giving me, you know, $1 million per year, and go ahead and put that in table 4. And I'm like, $1 million per year, really? That's the direct cost? And so I'll question them and verify and say, is that really the direct cost? And they'll say, oh, no. That is the total cost for the total project. And then you have to kind of go back and say, no, we need the annual direct cost. So they might just give you, you know, their research, their other support document, which is part of the information, but not all the information. So sometimes it's, you know, if you see things that are askew like that, you're going to have to go back to them and verify data. And really all the data you should be, you know, double checking if in a perfect world, but we don't always have time, right? And there's just some data that you can't verify. And then of course, submitting, that's your end game, right? So this is more of the weeds of the whole process. So understanding the purpose, and I'm going to get into this next, creating a timeline, and then having an initial kickoff meeting, getting organized, identify what tables you need. So if you're doing just a pre-doc application or a post-doc application or mixed, exactly which tables, then you need to you have to decide, am I going to use extract or just Word documents, the Word tables from the website. So extract, which I'll get into here in a second, you put in all the data table information in there, and it spits out the tables for you, and everything is formatted. And this is in the ERA Commons. This is in the ERA Commons profile for your PI. So one of the huge things here is you have to know what faculty are going to be on your grant. If you don't know who faculty are going to be on your grant, you can't do anything. And I've had meetings where you have that kickoff meeting and they have no idea that what other faculty are going to be on the grant, and they want to submit 6 weeks from now. I'm like, there's no way. You need to decide like yesterday who's going to be on this grant, because how do I know who to go out and ask information from if I don't know who's on the grant? So that is a key thing. If you have 35 or 50 faculty, you're going to need to identify them as soon as possible. Sending emails, which I know that sounds pretty basic, but you need to know what you're going to be asking for. And so I have email templates, so exactly what information you need to ask for and what you don't need to ask for. Keeping a checklist. Okay, what answers? I mean, when I was doing this grant of 153 faculty, I had 100 and, you know, some odd different faculty members or admins emailing me all their information. So for me, I always need a checklist to go, okay, Dr. Smith is, you know, responded, they gave me this information, they gave me this information, but then I had to go back and verify the direct cost. So keeping notes in a spreadsheet to me is invaluable, especially if you have multiple people working on those tables. Then you have that communication between all of you. Inputting the information, whether it's putting it in the tables or extract, which I'll get to. There's always going to be some hard information to find, in particular 6B, which is the postdoc applicant data, since we don't have a system for that. I touched on this a little bit last week during the training tracking. So, you know, sometimes it's going to take some tackling to and some thought on how to get some of this data. So even once you have all your data, well, and I don't think you're ever going to fully have all of your data. You have to come to a point and like a hard stop when you stop collecting data, and then making sure, okay, now I have to review it for corrections, verification, and then I have to go ahead and submit. And I'll give you an example. What I was doing a grant last month and it was due September 25th. And I remember 7 days before, or the weekend before, I got an email from the PI and they said, oh, we want to quickly add, I don't know why my hand's up, because it's because I'm doing my work, talking with my hands, but all of a sudden at the last minute, a week before the deadline, they wanted to add a PI, add a faculty member. And I'm like, okay, you really want me to be working on that right now? Like, so you should have decided this a long time ago. But so going ahead and making revisions at that late in the game, you have to have a hard stop point and where, you know, you have to be able to have time to review them. Also, one thing to remember is once you have all those data tables together, the PI has to write about them in the program plan. So they can't finish the program plan. They could do a lot of it, but they need to put all these little statistics in the program plan. So that is, you know, something that the PI is going to be constantly asking for. Like, what are the data tables going to be done? Because I need to finish the program plan. So, like I said, you can get your Microsoft Word tables off of the NIH website, or you can use Extract. I prefer Extract. Most of you, I think, are familiar with Extract. Extract is extramural training, reporting, and career tracking. And it's a tool within the ERA Commons that creates these data tables. You put in all the information, and then it creates all the data, the tables. Now it's required for RPPR. So if you have a renewal grant, you're already doing Extract. You already know about this, but it's not required for your new and renewal grants. So, you know, a lot of people ask me, what is your preference, Jill? I prefer to use Extract. It does have issues, but I still prefer it because I still think it's better. And I'll tell you, I put in a grant last May, and the person that I took it over from was leaving the position, and so they were doing it by hand. They were doing it by Microsoft Word documents. I hated it because the formatting took so much longer and it was such a pain in the butt. And so honestly, I think Extract, it does have its downside, but it's in the long run, I think it's better. So again, it pre-populates some data, it pulls the X-Train data. So if you've already had trainees on in your program, it's going to pull in all their data. It's going to go out to NIH Reporter and pull out the research funding for your faculty. Once you put in Jane Smith's name, it's going to go out there and reach in and take all of her NIH funding and pre-populate that table, which is great, right? But sometimes the problem is the amounts aren't always correct. So again, it's not the perfect system. And then there is data that would be, if you're submitting an RPPR, your progress report each year, that data is stored in there. So if you next time you go to do a renewal, you can copy that table 8 data and then into your renewal application. There's a lot more that I think there could be tons of improvements with this system. Now, I don't know how long we've been using it now. Gosh, it's been a while, but I think we were testing it back in like 2015. So it's been around for a while. NIH, I mean, they have not done enough to do. They could do more upgrades on this, is all I can say. And so it would be nice if they did, and really it could be used to its full potential, but maybe someday. But anyway, the downside is it does require a lot of data entry at the beginning. And then, like I said, there's bugs in the system, which whether those will be fixed by NIH. So if you have access to your PI, especially, you'll need delegation of authority, and you'll just go into your ERA Commons, you'll click on Extract, and if you have delegation for them, you could go ahead and search and find them. And then this is just a screenshot of what they call a research training data set in RTD would look like. And so you would add in all your faculty, and then all your trainees, or if it's a renewal grant, it's going to pull all that information from Xtrain right in there. So it starts building out your tables. You're still going to have to add a lot of information. But for the most part, it does help. So I haven't sold everybody on that on campus. And, like I said, it's optional to use it for new and renewal grants, but I figured you're already using it for your RPPRs. You might as well just continue to use it. So getting organized. So I try to give some tips to the admin and to the PIs. I don't know if I have any PIs on here today, but I find it important that there's certain things to think about. So usually, and I just had an admin actually contact me last week, and he was like, my PI wants to submit a training grant, and what do I do? And I go, okay, first of all, you need to have a kickoff meeting. You need to get everybody involved, whoever's going to be doing your data tables, whoever's going to be doing your budget, your DBO, whoever, and your PI, of course. And then you need to like delegate. Okay, who's doing what? Obviously, the PI is going to be running the program plan, but maybe he has a team of people. Who's gonna be doing data tables? Is it going to be 1 or 2 or 3 of you? And who's going to be doing the budget? Who's going to be doing the KR record? Who's going to be doing assist? So really, I think it's important to be having regular meetings and then holding people accountable in those meetings. And I'll tell you, with one of the first training grants I did here on campus, we kind of just divided it up, and I can't remember, it was like there was 3 of us doing the data tables. And so I said, I'll do tables, 1 and 2. The next person said, okay, I'll do 3, 4, 5. And the next person said, oh, I'll do 6, 7, 8. Okay. So we didn't have frequent meetings. We didn't check in, like we should have. And it came down to like a week before the submission, and the person for doing table 6 is like, well, I couldn't collect the data. I can't figure out how to do it. So I don't have anything for table 6. I was like, oh my gosh, like we should have been talking about this a long time ago. And so that's a pretty crucial table, and it's a hard table to get information for, but it was also like the expectation was, from that initial meeting, she was going to do this, but then there was no accountability to keep them on task. And she was so busy with other stuff. She's like, oh, I just, I kind of blew it off. So that got very complicated. So the PI is always going to be asking you, like, about, I would say, a month before, if not Wilma as knows, a couple months before the deadline, when are these going to be done? I need this information because I need to write the narrative. Again, there's a lot that they have to reference to the tables, but there's a lot of the program plan that they can write without it. But yes, it is important for them to have all that data. So you can't just, if it's due September 25th, you can't stop working on it September 25th. Your hard deadline will need to be, it could be a month before, it could be a week before. It really depends on the PI and their working style. I had this last grant that I was working on. The PI kept saying, well, when am I going to have the data tables done? And they kept adding new faculty. And I go, well, as soon as you stop adding faculty, then I can finish the tables. And they didn't quite understand, they don't, you have to remember, your faculty don't necessarily know what all the data tables, consist of, and the process. So one thing, when I do have that initial meeting, when I meet with the PI, I want to make sure that they understand, is your program unique? And as I was saying before, we have, I think, about 50 T32s, but overall we have almost 69, 70 training grants on the campus. Maybe there's another program on campus already, and we can't justify another program. So do they even know if their program is unique? That is something that you could look on table 3, because that would list all of the other training grants on the campus. They need to identify, what institute are they going to be submitting to. There might be a special FOA for that institute. It may not just be the parent T32. Again, a key one here is they're the ones that are going to tell you what faculty are going to be on this grant, and they need to come up with 35 or 50 or 100 names, right? you can't identify them. They have to be telling you that. And if they don't know, you can't start your job. So again, this is what I was just saying about checking the overlapping faculty. If there's a lot of overlap with other grants, say if you have 15 faculty on your grant, but 10 of them are also on, another grant on campus, they're going to say, well, maybe there's not a lot of difference in the program. Why should we fund another program when you already have, this amount of faculty on another one? And so that can come into the strategy for the proposal of who am I going to put on there for faculty. So there's a lot of strategic things that you need to look at for putting together a training grant. And then remember I was saying earlier, you want to look at the ranks and the diversity of your faculty. So that needs to come into play as well. So a lot of things that you have to balance. And then what departments and programs are going to be involved? If you have a lot of chemistry faculty, obviously you're going to have the Department of Chemistry. But you're not going to be including physics on that grant because there's no physics faculty. So it seems like it's obvious stuff, but sometimes it can get muddled though. Looking at strengths and weaknesses from prior applications, I do have something on the website on what they look at. And again, that could be arbitrary. Sometimes NIGMS is looking at something different than NCI. So it just depends. Some study sections are going to be more centric on how many research dollars you have versus, what are your program outcomes. So it just depends on, the program, of course, right? I always tell my PI, if you're going to be submitting a new training grant, reach out to the program official and get their advice on the submission. We did this a couple of years ago, and they basically talked us out of it. They said, you don't have sufficient data and you don't have the resources or whatever to put this for us to fund the program. So we never did submit. And then they said, oh, years from now maybe we'll submit. We still haven't submitted, but it could save you a lot of time. And they could also kind of give you insight. Are they even funding a project like that right now or whatever? So if it's a resubmission, I just found out yesterday I have to do a resubmission for a grant. And so I'm very curious to get the comments back, and that we actually submitted for a renewal grant. And it wasn't funded, and the grant's been pretty successful for the last 30 years. And so we're very curious to see the criteria of, the critiques on why it wasn't funded. And so, and then we'll have to address all of those things in the resubmission. Institutional commitments came into play, I think about 5 years ago. NIH is really wanting to see what skin in the game your institution has as far as these training programs. And so there's an institutional letter that comes with the parent T32 and a lot of other T32s these days. And so you have to get an institutional commitment letter from the campus. But that is something like, and it's basically kind of cost sharing, depends on if they're pitching in funds or not. But that is something that they really look at these days. And then your PI also needs to understand the data tables. If they don't understand what you're trying to collect, it's, it can be a problem. Like I said, that the PI that I was working with, they kept saying, well, aren't these data tables finished yet? And they're like, oh, and by the way, can you add Jane Doe to your list? I'm like, well, no, they're not finished. You're like, and they just didn't understand like what data I needed to collect. So anyway, remember, I think the one thing to remember is the data that you're collecting has to support your program. So if you are saying, okay, I have 50% underrepresented minorities on my grant, then your tables, and you write that in the narrative, your data tables better reflect that. And if they say 25%, the reviewer is going to go, wow, there's a huge, gap here between the program plan and the data tables. So you want to make sure your data tables are reflecting the program plan and vice versa. So, timeline for submission, this can, this is kind of just a sample. The grant that I just worked on, we submitted last week, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was now. And we started last January, or I'm sorry, December, maybe November. I don't even remember. We started a long time ago. Obviously the frequency of the meetings we increased as the summer came along, but that because it was such a large grant. If you're doing a smaller grant, I would say 3 months probably, 4 months. It just kind of depends on how many faculty are on your grant. I mean, that's a huge factor. If you send out 50 emails and only 25 faculty respond, you're still missing data for 25 faculty. How are you going to get that? So it takes a while to get people just to respond to an email. I know people could say that about me. If you're emailing, they email you, Jill, and you never respond. Well, that's just the nature of email, right? So some people are going to respond, some people aren't as quickly. And then when you write them 12 times later, then they might respond. Or, and there is a strategy, I think, also to how you respond or how you write an email to your faculty to get them to respond, which I'll kind of go through. So this is a proposal checklist that I have on my website. These are just tools. These aren't things you have to use, but these are all the things that will be listed on a Parent T32, and these are all the components that you need. And so for me, when I'm in that stakeholder first meeting, I'm going to put a name going, okay, Christy, you are going to be getting the KR record, and you are going to be doing the assist package, and who's going to be writing the cover letter? Okay, Dr. Smith, who's going to be writing this? And then I put your name there, and I'm going to hold you accountable, or whoever's running your meetings. And then, okay, who's going to be doing this? And so it's really important to know who's doing what, because there's so many moving parts to these grants. So I think this is super important. Some people have other ways of organizing themselves. Whatever, like I said, whatever works for you. So when you email your PIs, there's certain things you're going to want to ask them based on those tables, right? So one thing in table 2, it asks for your research interest. And so you're going to need to know that from your PI. You're going to need an NIH biosketch, which isn't a part of the tables, but you're going to need that to put this application together. So what I always try to tell people to do is only try to email your PI or your PI and their admin once. Don't email them once and say, oh, I need your mentor records. And then you email them a couple days later going, oh, wait, can you send me your research support? And then they send you their research support and it's their other support. And then you say, oh, no, I just need your annual direct costs. So see what I mean? Like people start to get annoyed when you do that. So, and you have less responses that way. So try to keep an email concise and to the point. And ask for all the things you need to ask for, but try to keep it as succinct as possible. So mentoring records are one of these things that's just like the bane of my existence. And I say that because there's no place this information is kept except on their BioBib, which isn't something we all have access to. And so really only that information can come from your PI. So that can be difficult. Then that means you need a PI response for that, right? So research support, again, that's the other support, but it's the annual direct cost. So I actually have this email sample on the website. You can copy and paste it and tweak it and do whatever you want, and then send this out. There's different ways of gathering, like I said, gathering the data. I think Holly gave me this. There was a great spreadsheet that Scripps would send, Research Institute, I think, would send to their faculty, and it had different tabs, and like tab 1 was your or tab 1 was all your mentor records, and then tab 2 was all your postdoc publications, and then tab 3 was your research support. So you could just send them an email and say, see attached, fill everything out or whatever, and then put the instructions there.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, go ahead, Holly.
The thing that TSRI did that I really appreciated for that grant was that they pre-filled for each of the faculty participating with the information they provided prior to. That can be a little much if you're trying to get information from 70 faculty, but sometimes if there is time or somebody can assist with that, it's very much appreciated. They get super frustrated sending out the same information over and over and over.
And some people, and it also comes down to personality. Some people they don't mind hitting the attachments and doing it, saving it to your desktop. I feel, and this is just a personal preference, because what do I know? I feel like if you keep it to an email form and pretty short, and I will have this like an editable format in the email, so they can just hit respond and they can put the numbers in. To me, this is what works, but like I said, everybody has a different way of doing things. I know Holly and I use Google Docs a lot. You could collect data in Google Docs. You could send them a Google spreadsheet or a Google form. They can fill it out there. Whatever you think is going to get the best responses. I've had one group that they would tell them to go into their eRay Commons and update their data and extract for them. And so I said, well, how did that work out for you? And she goes, well, about 2 faculty members did that out of 50. I said, okay, there you go. Great concept, right? Wouldn't it be great if they could all update their own data? But that's not gonna happen. I'm sorry, that's like you're asking someone to update their eRay Commons profile. Nobody does that. I'm sorry, but who does that, right? Until you're pressed to do it. So this is what works for me. So what I do, and I like to say, is I like to hand feed or enable, whatever you want to call it, my faculty. So I will put in here information like Holly was just saying, hey, this is what I found on a previous grant, that you had 3 pre-docs. This is your mentor record. Is this still correct? And then they may say, no, I have actually 6 now, 1 graduated, or whatever. Same thing with the research support. I will go out to the campus databases and find out what's all the research support that they have, list it, and then, hopefully the information is correct. And then I'll say, is this correct? Or am I missing any data? Or are these amounts correct? And then that way they can just correct the data. They don't have to supply all the data. So to me, that's what works, but that's not going to be everybody. So some of this data, if you're using Extract, you already have the data because it's especially if it's NIH grants, which is a big funder, you already have that data. You don't need them to go out and fish for that data if you already have it, right? So I just, I will add it into the email and say, could you just verify this and maybe highlight it? Something like that. So again, I'm trying to go for the quickest way possible to get a response. And I'm telling you, there's certain PIs, as we all know, that will respond right away. You'll get that data right away. And then I had someone respond to me 3 days ago and said, oh, did I meet the deadline? I'm like, no, it was, I didn't even bother responding back, right? I'm like, no, you didn't meet the deadline. I had to go out and, find it someplace else. So, it's always going to be hit and miss. But if you make this initial email to them too long, their eyes glaze over. At least mine do. Because if I have more than I don't know, 1 paragraph, my eyes start to glaze over. So anyway, these are all the things you're going to be asking for. So the BioSketch, this isn't a BioSketch class today or whatever, but BioSketches are very important to the training grants, and they are very much different than a research grant. So it's important that they are putting in their personal statement that this is for mentoring purposes, not for research purposes. So that is really, I think, important. And on the NOFO of my last grant, it was extremely specific on what they wanted in that BioSketch. They wanted They wanted equity, diversity, inclusion. They wanted mentoring records. They wanted a statement saying you support the program, a statement that you support the career goals of each trainee. It was very, very specific. So that's something that you should always be looking out for. Like I said, I put a Google form together. If you want to send out a Google survey to all your faculty and say, click here and upload, all this information, your research support, tell me how many pre-docs you have, postdocs, blah, blah, blah. Go for it. I don't find that this works very well. Again, it's uploading something as opposed to just responding to an email. I find it just people respond quicker to an email. But like I said, this is here. If you want access to it, let me know. Send me an email. Things that you don't want to ask a PI for. And I've seen this where an admin, they'll just literally just attach table 1 and they'll send it to a PI and say, can you fill this out for your department? And they'll look at you like you're crazy. So you never ask them for information about the departments or programs. This is information that you'll have to go directly to the program coordinator or the department to get this kind of data. If it's, ARC, and you need to know how many faculty are in pathology. A lot of times, like on the last grant I was working on, I just went to the program website and I counted how many faculty are in the biomedical sciences program. I mean, it was as simple as that. And I could have emailed the program coordinator, but to me, I thought that was the easiest way. So again, there's all these different avenues of going out and collecting that data. Institutional training grants. I keep a list of all the training grants on the campus and then all the faculty on those different training grants. So we have over 1,000 faculty. We have around 70 training grants and 1,000 faculty members, individual faculty members. Some faculty members who are extremely, popular, maybe on 10 different training grants on the campus. So there's a lot of overlap between, different training grants. So I have that data, it's on the website. So do not ask a PI, like, what other training grants are you on? Because we already have that data. Pre-doc, applicant and entrant data for those who have applied to be a grad student, like say in chemistry. This data will come from GEPA, the graduate office, and I can collate that data for you. I get access to it, and then I can put it in a spreadsheet and send it to you. So you just need to reach out to me for that. You don't need to reach out to GEPA for that. Table 6B. This data is not collected anywhere, if you recall from my training tracking last week. So this is just a bear to get. And there's different ways to get this data, or not, I should say. And then table 7, that is just for your renewals, and you're just going to basically look at the who was appointed for the last 4 years. So you don't need to be asking your faculty for that. So I think it's important to know what you need to ask for and what you not need to ask for. So I put together some checklists because I love checklists. I love Excel. I know it's an odd thing, but some of us are weird like that. And so I will list all of your faculty. And actually, let me show you. I think I probably have one up. Yeah, I have one right here. So here's just a sample checklist. Can you guys see my Excel spreadsheet? I just need one person to nod their head. Yeah, okay. So here's all your participating faculty. This is their rank, department, degree, and this is all the information that you're going to need for them to fill out table 2 and 4. And so, I will say I heard back from John Doe, and maybe he didn't give me all the information, so I still need this information. So it's good to keep yourself organized and know, okay, I've already contacted them. I've already emailed them on this date. I need to email again, and keeping track of all that. And I've made that mistake. I'll email someone going, oh, I didn't get your information. And they're like, I already sent it to you, whatever. And then I would list all your pre-docs here or postdocs. and then all their faculty members, and then all the data that you need for your program outcomes, your table 8. And then I also have a little thing here at the end that you can do your mentor calculations for table 1. So, and that's based on the departments that are involved. So this is, like I said, this is just a sample spreadsheet of what I do, you know, based on each grant is just totally different. And again, it's good to have, if you have multiple people working on data tables, multiple people emailing them, or emailing different faculty, it's important to keep yourself organized. I cannot stress that enough. It's just being organized, asking the right person the right question. I'll get copied on emails, and someone from wherever someone emailed and said, and they'll just kind of turn it around and they'll say, well, Jill knows about that, and or whatever, and they won't give you the information. They don't know how to get the information. You think they should, but they don't necessarily. So that's a big, and that's a biggie right there. And then keeping the instructions handy, and that's a reason why I gave you that overview of the tables, because you need to understand the rationale for each table, because if you don't understand that, then you aren't going to necessarily understand the instructions and the type of data that you're gathering. So and then, you know, of course, with NIH there's interpretation, and every PI, just like anything else, has a different interpretation of things. And so you really have to go by the guidance of your PI. And so I will make it very clear, do you want me to do this, or do you want me to do that? And being able to feel comfortable enough with them and ask them that. But make it very clear, so that way you're not duplicating your efforts or whatever. So on the website, I have a whole page dedicated to data tables and extract. I have a whole page about getting started, about creating that initial stakeholders meeting. You know, if it's a renewal or whatever. I mean, I have people I've already had 2 groups reach out to me for next May they know they're submitting next May. And so they are looking to get started. And to me, that's like fantastic that if you're starting now, that's great. I mean, the planning is really, really important in being organized. I can't tell you enough on that. So somebody asked me just today, do I have all these training sessions on the web? Yes, I do. I'll post the slides and the video here. And then we also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to just go straight out to the YouTube channel, get the video from there. Anyway, I was kind of a bad presenter just now because I did not even ask for questions. And so now I'm opening it up. Does anybody have any questions on all that good stuff? Oh, one thing I want to tell you guys before I forget. Over here. So next week for office hours, I'm going to be going over data tables 2 and 1, and I say that correct. Data table 2 is more important than data table 1, in my opinion. So we'll be going over those 2 tables, and then I'll be off for 3 weeks. So I'll be out of the country. So no office hours, unless of course somebody wants to do office hours for me. I know everyone's volunteering, so never mind. And then, so when I come back, then we'll go through all the other data tables. Yeah, so just so you know, I will be out of the office. I do answer email when I'm away, but I won't be doing any presentations. So anyway, who has questions for me? You know, this is the hardest thing about doing a Zoom presentation is just you look at a bunch of boxes and usually nobody's on camera. At least I have 2 people on camera, but you know, and they're just like, everybody's on, you know, you can't make eye contact with anybody. You don't know if people are sleeping or, you know, balancing their checkbook or whatever.
Thank you. It's always so great presentation. So I do have questions. It's about table 1, but I see that next week you're going to discuss that. So I'm going to wait until then. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. It's
have
always
a
nice to see you. It's always nice to see people that I haven't seen you guys in person forever. So Ava, did you have questions?
Yes, thanks for the presentation today, Jill, and I was taking notes and glad to know that I also can refer back and it'll be there on the website. Just because I'm still sort of new at the whole thing, and these tables are coming up for our group. I know we're one of the groups that's starting early on this, but is there a possibility we could start too early, such as, you know, things change all the time for these faculty members. They could gain new mentees, and they could also gain new grants. And so is it better to have them reply by a certain date that you specify?
Yeah, so usually I will put in the email, like apply or reply by a certain date. But yes, you can easily start.
What is the rule of thumb that you use for trying to get?
I try to get an email like a response, like say at least the last drop dead deadline would be 6 weeks before the grant, but preferably 2 months. But then I'm sending it out, say 3 months in advance. So it depends, but I'll give you an example. So this last round, the PIs, again, it's usually driven by the PIs, right? They wanted me to start sending out emails last April for a September deadline. So I did, which, okay. And some people respond right away. And then, some people would say, well, when's this grant due? And I was embarrassed to tell them, yeah, I'm soliciting for September already, because they're just going to go, well, I'm busy, for this deadline. So actually, so I got a bunch of bio sketches from last April. Well, a lot of them were assistant or associate professors, and they actually got promotions July 1. So then all those bio sketches were incorrect, and I didn't know it, right? And so it was like, it was a little bit of a scramble to make sure, I had people that were listed as assistants, but they were actually associates, and the program plan said they were associates, but the information that they gave me back in April said they're, so yes, it could be possible to ask. That's too early, right? And then your data tables were going to say, no, they're a professor. Oh, wait, no, wait, are they an assistant professor? So, yeah, it is possible. Obviously, research support changes all the time, right? It's very fluid. So, yeah, you don't want, you could start planning though, like all these meetings with your PI, all of this kind of stuff, you could start laying that groundwork, right? Finding the resources. Okay, where am I going to find this data? Stuff like that. So yeah, it is possible that, things will change. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Oh, are you going to sign off? Yeah, it's 1:04. So if you want to sign off, I get it. Unless you have questions for me, I'll stay on.
Oh, no, I just, I'll have questions next week on table 1.
Okay, sounds
Thank
good.
you, Jill.
My pleasure. Bye.
Thank you, Jill.
My pleasure. We'll talk soon, Wilma.
Okay.
Jill.
Bye. Bye, Nita. Nice to see you. Oh, wait, my dog's saying hi.
I'm gonna go hop on a meeting with Amy. She's gonna torture me with T32. So
Tell her hello for me, and I still need to get together with her.
not a problem.
Tell her that.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Maria, did you have any questions for me? Otherwise, I'm going to sign off. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sign off.